Staff Sergeant Maria Santos checked her gear one final time before stepping onto the Marine Corps shooting range at Camp Pendleton. The California sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete firing positions, and the familiar smell of gun oil and cordite hung in the air. She had been looking forward to this qualification day for weeks, but as she approached the range, the atmosphere felt different than usual. The other Marines were already gathering around the weapons racks, and Maria noticed the conversation seemed to quiet as she walked by. She had experienced this before during her 8 years in the Corps, but today it felt more intense. The shooting range had always been considered sacred ground by many Marines, a place where only the most skilled marksmen earned respect. Well, look what we have here," called out Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison, a tall man with arms covered in tattoos. He was known throughout the battalion as one of the best shooters, and his opinion carried weight among the junior Marines. "Looks like they're sending the ladies to play with the big boys today." Several Marines around Morrison chuckled, and Maria felt their eyes on her as she continued toward the equipment area. She had dealt with comments like this countless times, but something about Morrison's tone suggested today would be different. The man had a reputation for being particularly harsh on female Marines, often questioning whether they belonged in combat roles. Maria had joined the Marines straight out of high school in a small town in Texas. Her father had been a Marine, and her grandfather before him. The Corps was in her blood, and she had never questioned her decision to serve. But from the moment she arrived at boot camp, she faced skepticism from both instructors and fellow recruits who believed women had no place in the military. During her first deployment to Afghanistan, Maria had proven herself in combat operations, earning the respect of most Marines in her unit. She had saved lives, completed dangerous missions, and shown the same courage under fire as any of her male counterparts. But somehow, when it came to the shooting range, old prejudices seemed to resurface. The range instructor, Master Sergeant Williams, called for attention. He was a fair man who had served with distinction for over 20 years, and Maria respected his leadership. However, she noticed he seemed uncomfortable with the tension building among the Marines. "Listen up, Marines," Williams announced. "Today we're conducting annual rifle qualifications. Everyone will fire from the 200, 300, and 500-yard lines. Minimum score for expert is 220 out of 250 possible points. No exceptions, no excuses." Morrison stepped forward with a smirk on his face. "Master Sergeant, I have a question about the course of fire. Are we using the same standards for everyone, or are there special accommodations for certain Marines?" The implication was clear, and Maria felt her jaw tighten. She had never asked for special treatment and had always met the same standards as her male counterparts. In fact, her shooting scores had consistently been among the top 10% in every unit she had served with. Williams looked uncomfortable, but maintained his professional demeanor. "The standards are the same for all Marines, Sergeant Morrison. Now let's get this qualification started." As the Marines moved to their assigned firing positions, Maria noticed she had been placed at the far end of the line, away from most of the other shooters. She suspected this was intentional, designed to isolate her from the group. But she had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words, and she was confident in her abilities. The first stage of qualification involved firing from the prone position at 200 yards. Maria settled into her shooting stance, adjusting her body position until she felt completely stable. She had spent countless hours perfecting her technique, learning to control her breathing and eliminate any movement that could affect her accuracy. Through her scope, the targets looked small and distant, but Maria had hit these same targets hundreds of times before. She focused on her breathing, taking slow, deep breaths and releasing them gradually. When she felt ready, she squeezed the trigger slowly and smoothly, feeling the rifle recoil against her shoulder. The bullet struck the target dead center, earning her a perfect score for the first shot. She continued methodically, taking her time with each round and maintaining perfect consistency. By the time she finished the 200-yard stage, she had scored 10 perfect hits out of 10 shots. Morrison, shooting several positions away, had also performed well but had missed one shot slightly to the left. Maria noticed him glancing over at her target with a look of surprise and irritation. He had expected her to struggle, and her perfect performance clearly bothered him. Lucky start. Morrison called out loud enough for others to hear. Let's see how she does when the range gets longer. The 300-yard stage presented more challenges, as wind conditions could affect bullet trajectory and the targets appeared smaller. Maria adjusted her scope for the increased distance and took her time studying the wind flags placed along the range. A slight breeze was coming from the left, which would require a minor adjustment to her aim point. She settled into position again, feeling the familiar comfort of the rifle against her shoulder. The weight of the weapon felt natural in her hands, like an extension of her own body. This was the result of thousands of hours of practice and training, combined with a natural talent that had emerged during her early days in the Corps. Her first shot at 300 yards struck the target slightly to the right of center, still well within the scoring ring. She made a small adjustment and continued firing, adapting to the changing wind conditions with each shot. By the end of the stage, she had scored 9 out of 10 perfect hits, with one shot scoring just 1 point less than perfect. The other Marines were starting to take notice of her performance. Even those who had been skeptical were beginning to show grudging respect for her consistency and accuracy. Morrison, however, seemed more determined than ever to find fault with her shooting. She's probably using modified equipment, he said to another Marine, speaking just loud enough for Maria to hear. Or maybe she's getting help from the range coaches. Master Sergeant Williams overheard the comment and stepped over to Morrison's position. Sergeant Morrison, I want to see you after the qualification is complete. Your comments are out of line and unprofessional. Morrison's face reddened, but he knew better than to argue with the Master Sergeant. Instead, he channeled his anger into his own shooting, determined to outperform Maria on the final and most challenging stage of the qualification. The 500-yard stage was where most Marines struggled. At this distance, even slight imperfections in technique or equipment could result in missed shots. The targets appeared tiny through the scope, and environmental factors like wind, temperature, and humidity could significantly affect bullet flight. Maria took extra time to study the conditions before beginning this stage. The wind had picked up slightly, and she could see heat waves rising from the desert floor between her position and the targets. These conditions would require careful compensation and perfect execution of her shooting fundamentals. As she prepared for her first shot, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She remembered being a young girl, watching her father clean his service rifle and listening to his stories about Marine Corps traditions. She had always known she wanted to serve, but she never imagined it would be this difficult to earn acceptance from her fellow Marines. The prejudice she faced was not just about gender. It was about challenging long-held beliefs about who belonged in the Marine Corps and what roles women should fill. Every time she excelled, she was not just proving herself, but also paving the way for other women who would follow. She squeezed the trigger for her first shot at 500 yards, watching through her scope as the bullet traveled downrange. The shot felt good, and she was confident it would hit the target well. However, at this distance, it was difficult to see exactly where the bullet struck without spotting scopes or electronic scoring systems. Morrison was shooting at the same time, and Maria could see him struggling with the wind conditions. His shots were grouping well, but consistently hitting to the left of the target center. He was getting frustrated, which was affecting his shooting technique and making his performance worse with each subsequent shot. By the time Maria finished her 10 shots at 500 yards, she felt confident about her performance. Her shooting had felt consistent and controlled, and she had maintained good sight picture and trigger control throughout the stage. However, she would have to wait for the targets to be scored before knowing her exact results. As the Marines waited for scoring to be completed, Morrison continued his campaign of criticism and doubt. He questioned everything from Maria's equipment to her training background, suggesting that she must have received special coaching or assistance to perform at this level. There's no way a female Marine can outshoot experienced male Marines, he said to a group of junior enlisted personnel. Something's not right about this whole situation. Other Marines in the group looked uncomfortable with Morrison's comments, but few were willing to openly challenge a senior non-commissioned officer. Maria overheard the conversation but chose to remain silent. knowing that her scores would speak more effectively than any words she could offer. Master Sergeant Williams returned from the target line with a clipboard full of scoring sheets. His expression was serious, but Maria thought she detected a hint of a smile as he approached the group of Marines waiting for their results. "Marines, I have your qualification scores," Williams announced. "Before I post the results, I want to remind everyone that marksmanship is one of the most fundamental skills in our Corps. Every Marine, regardless of background or experience, has the potential to excel if they apply themselves to proper training and practice." The tension among the Marines was obvious as Williams prepared to read the scores. Morrison stood with his arms crossed, still confident that his years of experience and reputation as a shooter would ensure his superiority over Maria and any other Marine present. Williams began reading names and scores in alphabetical order, and Maria waited patiently for her turn. When Morrison's score was announced at 235 out of 250, he smiled with satisfaction and looked around to ensure others had heard his excellent performance. Finally, Williams called Maria's name. The range fell silent as Marines waited to hear whether the female Marine had lived up to the standards expected of all Marines, or whether Morrison's skepticism had been justified. Staff Sergeant Santos, Williams announced clearly, scored 248 out of 250 possible points, qualifying expert, and achieving the highest score of the day. The silence stretched for several seconds as the Marines processed what they had just heard. Maria had not only qualified expert but had achieved a nearly perfect score that exceeded Morrison's performance by a significant margin. The only way her score could have been higher would have been to miss fewer than 2 points across all 3 stages of firing. Morrison's face showed complete shock and disbelief. He had been so certain that his experience and natural ability would ensure his dominance on the range that Maria's superior performance seemed impossible to accept. Other Marines began to murmur among themselves, discussing the unexpected results and what they meant for their preconceived notions about female Marines. Williams continued with his announcement, explaining that Maria had achieved perfect scores at both 200 and 300 yards, missing only 2 points during the challenging 500-yard stage. This level of performance was exceptional even among the most experienced Marine marksmen. As the Marines began to disperse from the range, Maria quietly gathered her equipment and prepared to clean her rifle. She felt satisfied with her performance, but knew that one good day of shooting would not eliminate all the skepticism she faced as a female Marine in a traditionally male-dominated role. Morrison approached her as she was cleaning her weapon, his expression still showing disbelief and frustration. She could see he was struggling to accept what had happened, and that his worldview about female Marines had been significantly challenged by her performance. The foundation had been laid for what would become a defining moment in Maria's military career, though she had no idea that this day's events were only the beginning of a much larger confrontation that would test not only her shooting skills, but her resolve to prove that excellence knows no gender. The news of Maria's exceptional shooting performance spread quickly through the battalion, creating ripples of conversation in barracks, mess halls, and training areas. Some Marines expressed genuine admiration for her skill, while others, influenced by Morrison's continued skepticism, began to question the validity of her scores. Morrison had spent the evening after the qualification making phone calls to Marines he knew at other bases, trying to find examples of scoring irregularities or special treatment given to female Marines. His pride had been deeply wounded by being outperformed, and he was determined to find an explanation that would preserve his sense of superiority. 3 days after the qualification, Morrison approached Master Sergeant Williams with a formal complaint. He alleged that Maria's equipment had been modified, that she had received special coaching, or that the scoring had been intentionally inflated to make female Marines look better. Williams listened to the allegations with growing frustration, knowing they were baseless, but understanding that he needed to address them properly. "Sergeant Morrison," Williams said after listening to the complaints, "these are serious accusations that question the integrity of our qualification process. Are you prepared to substantiate these claims with evidence?" Morrison's confidence wavered slightly, but his pride drove him forward. "Master Sergeant, I'm just saying that her performance was suspicious. No female Marine shoots that well without some kind of advantage." Williams had served with many female Marines throughout his career and had seen firsthand their capabilities in combat and training environments. He found Morrison's attitude both outdated and unprofessional, but he also understood the importance of maintaining unit cohesion and addressing concerns before they became larger problems. "I'll tell you what, Morrison," Williams said after considering the situation. "We'll organize a special shooting competition. Staff Sergeant Santos can compete directly against you and any other Marine who questions her abilities. This will settle the matter once and for all." Morrison's eyes lit up with the possibility of redeeming himself. He had been thinking about the qualification constantly, analyzing every aspect of Maria's performance, and convincing himself that a direct competition would expose whatever advantages she had been given. "I accept those terms, Master Sergeant," Morrison replied quickly. "But I want the competition to be fair. No special equipment, no coaching, and scoring done by independent observers." Williams agreed to the conditions, though he was confident that Maria would perform just as well under any circumstances. He had observed her shooting technique during the qualification and recognized the signs of a naturally gifted marksman who had perfected her skills through dedicated practice. When Williams informed Maria about the proposed competition, she felt both frustrated and determined. She had hoped that her qualification performance would end the questions about her abilities, but she realized that some Marines would never accept her excellence without overwhelming proof. "Master Sergeant, I don't mind competing," Maria said, "but I want it understood that this isn't just about me. Every female Marine in the Corps is being judged by my performance. If I fail, it will be used as evidence that women don't belong in combat roles." Williams nodded, understanding the broader implications of the competition. The Marine Corps was still evolving in its acceptance of women in all military roles, and individual performances like this could influence policy decisions and cultural attitudes for years to come. Word of the upcoming shooting competition spread throughout the base like wildfire. Marines who had never shown interest in marksmanship suddenly wanted to attend, curious to see whether the female Marine could maintain her performance under direct pressure or whether Morrison would prove his superiority. The competition was scheduled for the following Friday, giving both Marines a week to prepare. Morrison spent every available hour at the range, practicing with different rifles and ammunition types to ensure optimal performance. He also recruited other expert marksmen to serve as his advisors, determined to leave nothing to chance. Maria, meanwhile, maintained her regular training routine but spent additional time studying the fundamentals of marksmanship. She reviewed breathing techniques, trigger control, and position stability, looking for any areas where she could improve her already excellent performance. The night before the competition, Maria called her father in Texas. He had retired from the Marines as a master gunnery sergeant and had always been her biggest supporter throughout her military career. "Dad, I need to tell you about something happening tomorrow," she said, explaining the situation and the pressure she was feeling to perform not just for herself, but for all female Marines. Her father listened carefully before responding. "Maria, I've watched you shoot since you were 12 years old. You have a natural talent that can't be taught, and you've worked harder than anyone I know to perfect your skills. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." He paused before continuing. "But remember, this isn't just about shooting. This is about character and integrity. Win or lose, make sure you conduct yourself with the honor that represents our family and our Corps." The conversation gave Maria the confidence she needed to face the challenge ahead. She had always known that being a female Marine would require her to prove herself repeatedly, but she was ready to meet that challenge head-on. Friday morning arrived with perfect weather conditions for shooting. The wind was calm, visibility was excellent, and temperatures were moderate. Master Sergeant Williams had arranged for the competition to be conducted at the 500-yard line, the most challenging distance that would truly test both Marines' skills. A crowd of nearly 50 Marines gathered around the range to witness the competition. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and tension as conversations buzzed about the outcome and its implications for the ongoing debate about women in combat roles. Williams had arranged for the competition to be scored by 3 independent observers from other units, ensuring complete fairness and eliminating any possibility of bias. Both Marines would fire 10 shots each, with the highest total score determining the winner. Morrison arrived early and spent time adjusting his equipment and studying the range conditions. He appeared confident and relaxed, joking with other Marines and making comments about how he planned to restore the proper order of things on the shooting range. When Maria arrived, the crowd quieted noticeably. She carried herself with quiet professionalism, checking her equipment methodically and taking time to study the targets and wind conditions. Her calm demeanor impressed some Marines while others interpreted it as overconfidence. Williams called both Marines to the firing line and explained the rules of the competition. Each would fire 10 rounds from the prone position at 500-yard targets. They would shoot simultaneously to ensure identical conditions, and scoring would be conducted immediately after each shot to provide real-time feedback to observers. This competition will be conducted with the highest standards of professionalism and sportsmanship, Williams announced to the crowd. Both Marines are representing the finest traditions of our Corps, and they deserve our respect regardless of the outcome. As the Marines settled into their shooting positions, the crowd moved to observation areas where they could watch through spotting scopes and binoculars. The tension was obvious among the observers, with groups forming based on their support for one Marine or the other. Morrison loaded his first round and settled into his shooting position. He had chosen a rifle he was completely familiar with and had spent hours adjusting the scope to ensure perfect accuracy. His confidence was high, and he felt ready to prove that experience and natural ability would triumph over whatever advantages Maria might have had during the qualification. Maria loaded her rifle and assumed her shooting position with the same methodical precision she had demonstrated during the qualification. She had chosen standard Marine Corps equipment without any modifications, wanting to eliminate any possibility of claims about unfair advantages. The range safety officer called for the first shot, and both Marines began their shooting sequence. The crowd watched in tense silence as the two competitors aimed at their respective targets, taking time to ensure perfect sight alignment and trigger control. Morrison fired first, his shot echoing across the range. Through the spotting scopes, observers could see that his bullet had struck the target well within the scoring ring, earning him 9 out of 10 possible points for an excellent start to the competition. Maria took slightly longer to fire her first shot, carefully controlling her breathing and ensuring perfect sight picture before squeezing the trigger. Her shot produced what appeared to be a perfect hit in the center of the target, earning her the full 10 points for the first round. The scoring pattern continued through the first 5 shots, with Morrison achieving consistent scores between 8 and 9 points while Maria maintained near-perfect accuracy with 4 10-point hits and 1 9-point score. The difference in their performance was becoming apparent to the observers, and conversations in the crowd began to shift. "She's really good," one Marine whispered to another. "I didn't think anyone could shoot that consistently at this distance." Morrison was beginning to feel pressure as he realized that Maria was not having a lucky day, but was demonstrating genuinely superior marksmanship skills. His own shooting, while excellent by normal standards, was not matching the precision he needed to compete with her performance. By the 8th shot, Morrison had scored 71 out of 80 possible points, an excellent performance that would earn respect on any range. However, Maria had scored 79 out of 80 points, missing perfection by only a single point across 8 shots. The mathematical reality was becoming clear that Morrison would need perfect shots on his final 2 attempts, while hoping Maria would miss significantly. The pressure of the situation began to affect Morrison's shooting technique. His breathing became less controlled, and his trigger squeeze became slightly rushed as he tried to force perfect shots rather than allowing them to happen naturally. His 9th shot hit the edge of the scoring ring, earning him only 7 points, and effectively ending his chances of victory. Maria, meanwhile, maintained the same calm precision she had shown throughout the competition. Her 9th shot struck the center of the target for another perfect score, bringing her total to 89 out of 90 possible points with only 1 shot remaining. The crowd had become completely silent as they witnessed what was clearly an exceptional display of marksmanship. Even Marines who had been skeptical of Maria's abilities were forced to acknowledge the skill they were observing. Morrison's final shot achieved 8 points, giving him a total score of 86 out of 100 possible points. This was an excellent performance that would normally earn congratulations and respect, but in the context of this competition, it represented a clear defeat. All attention turned to Maria as she prepared for her final shot. She had already won the competition mathematically, but the symbolic importance of this last shot was enormous. A perfect finish would cement her victory in a way that could never be questioned or dismissed. She took extra time with her final shot, understanding that this moment would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The rifle felt solid and comfortable in her hands, and the target appeared clear and sharp through her scope. She controlled her breathing, aligned her sights perfectly, and squeezed the trigger with the same smooth technique she had used throughout the competition. The bullet struck the exact center of the target, earning her a perfect 10 points and a final score of 99 out of 100 possible points. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, with even Marines who had been skeptical of her abilities joining in the recognition of her exceptional performance. Morrison stood up from his shooting position with a look of complete disbelief. He had shot well enough to win most competitions, but Maria's performance had been simply extraordinary. The reality of being decisively outperformed by the female Marine he had worked so hard to discredit was difficult for him to process. Williams approached both Marines with the official scores, though the results had been obvious to all observers. Sergeant Morrison, you achieved an excellent score of 86 points. Staff Sergeant Santos, you scored 99 points, one of the highest scores I've ever witnessed at this range. The crowd continued to cheer as Marines approached Maria to offer congratulations and express their admiration for her shooting skill. The competition had not only proven her abilities, but had also changed the attitudes of many Marines who had previously harbored doubts about female Marines in combat roles. Morrison found himself isolated as the celebration continued around him. His campaign to discredit Maria had backfired completely, and his own performance, while excellent, had been overshadowed by her exceptional skill. The competition had become a defining moment that would affect his reputation and relationships within the unit for years to come. In the days following the competition, the atmosphere in the battalion changed dramatically. Maria found herself at the center of attention, with Marines approaching her for shooting advice and expressing genuine respect for her abilities. However, Morrison's reaction to his defeat created new challenges that would test Maria's character in ways beyond marksmanship. Rather than accepting his defeat gracefully, Morrison became increasingly bitter and resentful. He began spreading rumors that the competition had been rigged, that Maria was using illegal equipment modifications, or that she had somehow cheated. His accusations grew more desperate and far-fetched as time passed, revealing the depth of his inability to accept being outperformed by a female Marine. The situation came to a head when Morrison filed a formal complaint with the Inspector General's office, alleging widespread corruption in the battalion's training programs, and specifically targeting Maria for what he claimed were violations of regulations and ethics. His complaint triggered an official investigation that would examine every aspect of Maria's service record and performance. Colonel Patricia Hayes, a highly respected Marine officer with over 20 years of service, was assigned to conduct the investigation. She had broken numerous barriers herself as one of the first female Marine aviators and understood the challenges that women faced in proving their worth within the Corps. Hayes began her investigation by interviewing Marines throughout the battalion, asking about their observations of Maria's performance and any evidence of irregularities or special treatment. What she discovered was a pattern of exceptional performance that had been consistent throughout Maria's entire career. Staff Sergeant Santos has consistently scored in the top 10% of every unit she has served with, reported Captain Johnson, Maria's current company commander. Her leadership abilities are outstanding, her physical fitness scores are maximal, and her combat performance during deployment was exemplary. Other Marines provided similar testimonials, describing Maria as a dedicated professional who had earned respect through hard work and exceptional performance rather than any form of favoritism or special treatment. Even Marines who had initially been skeptical of female Marines in combat roles spoke positively about Maria's contributions to their units. Hayes also conducted a detailed technical examination of Maria's equipment and training records. She arranged for ballistics experts to examine Maria's rifle and ammunition, looking for any modifications or advantages that might explain her exceptional shooting performance. The technical analysis revealed that Maria was using completely standard equipment without any modifications or enhancements. Her rifle was a standard-issue M16A that had been randomly selected from the armory, and her ammunition was the same type issued to all Marines for qualification and training. What the investigation did reveal was Maria's extensive personal commitment to improving her marksmanship skills. Training records showed that she had spent hundreds of hours at shooting ranges during her personal time, often arriving early and staying late to practice fundamental techniques and improve her consistency. Her shooting diary, which she had maintained throughout her career, documented a systematic approach to skill development that impressed even experienced marksmanship instructors. She had studied wind patterns, ammunition performance characteristics, and shooting position variations with the dedication of a professional athlete. This level of commitment to personal improvement is exceptional, noted Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, the battalion's senior marksmanship instructor. Staff Sergeant Santos has approached shooting with the same professional dedication that distinguishes all outstanding Marines, regardless of gender. While the investigation continued, Morrison's behavior became increasingly erratic and unprofessional. He was reprimanded twice for making inappropriate comments about female Marines and was eventually restricted to base pending completion of the investigation. His actions had consequences beyond his own career, as they began to affect unit morale and cohesion. Marines found themselves divided between those who supported Morrison's allegations and those who recognized them as baseless attacks motivated by wounded pride and prejudice. The situation reached a crisis point when Morrison confronted Maria directly in the battalion mess hall, accusing her publicly of being a fraud and demanding that she admit to cheating. The confrontation occurred in front of dozens of Marines and attracted immediate attention from the battalion leadership. "You think you're better than everyone else," Morrison shouted, his face red with anger and frustration. "You fooled a lot of people, but I know what you really are. You're nothing but a fake who doesn't belong in the Marine Corps." Maria remained calm despite the verbal assault, understanding that her response would be observed and judged by every Marine present. She had learned throughout her career that maintaining professionalism under pressure was essential to earning and keeping respect. "Sergeant Morrison," she replied in a steady voice, "I've never claimed to be better than anyone. I've simply done my job to the best of my ability and taken pride in representing the Marine Corps with honor. If you have specific allegations, I suggest you present them through proper channels." Her composed response contrasted sharply with Morrison's emotional outburst, and the observing Marines began to form judgments about which Marine was conducting themselves with appropriate professionalism and dignity. Master Sergeant Williams intervened before the situation could escalate further, ordering both Marines to report to the company commander immediately. However, the damage to Morrison's credibility had been significant, and his public display of anger and accusations without evidence had undermined whatever support he might have retained. Colonel Hayes interviewed both Marines as part of her investigation, and the contrast between their professionalism and character became immediately apparent. Morrison's interview was filled with vague accusations, conspiracy theories, and obvious bias, while Maria provided clear, factual responses supported by documentation and witness statements. Staff Sergeant Santos, Hayes said during Maria's interview, "These allegations against you are serious, and I want to ensure that you understand the full scope of this investigation. Is there anything in your background or training that might explain your exceptional marksmanship performance?" Maria had prepared for this question and provided a comprehensive explanation of her shooting background and training regimen. She described growing up in a family with strong military traditions, learning to shoot at an early age, and maintaining consistent practice throughout her Marine career. "Ma'am, I've always believed that excellence requires dedication and hard work," Maria explained. "I've spent thousands of hours practicing and studying marksmanship because I believe it's fundamental to being an effective Marine. My performance reflects that commitment, nothing more." Hayes was impressed by Maria's professionalism and the thoroughness of her preparation for the interview. It was clear that Maria had anticipated questions about her performance and had maintained detailed records that supported her explanations. The investigation also revealed information about Morrison's own background and motivations that cast his allegations in a different light. Several Marines reported that Morrison had made inappropriate comments about female Marines for years, expressing beliefs that women were inherently inferior and had no place in combat roles. His personnel file contained previous counseling statements for unprofessional conduct and bias, though none had been severe enough to result in formal disciplinary action. The pattern suggested that his allegations against Maria were motivated by prejudice rather than legitimate concerns about misconduct. As the investigation neared completion, Hayes arranged for one final test that would definitively settle questions about Maria's shooting abilities. She organized a comprehensive marksmanship evaluation that would be observed by expert marksmen from multiple units, and scored using electronic systems that eliminated any possibility of human bias or error. The test would involve shooting at multiple distances under various conditions, using different rifles and ammunition types randomly selected by the observers. If Maria could maintain her exceptional performance under these controlled conditions, it would prove conclusively that her abilities were genuine. Maria welcomed the opportunity to demonstrate her skills under the most rigorous conditions possible. She understood that this test would likely determine not only her own future, but also influence how female Marines would be perceived and treated throughout the Corps. The test was scheduled for the following week, giving Maria time to prepare mentally and physically for what would essentially be the most important shooting performance of her career. She knew that failure would validate Morrison's accusations and potentially damage opportunities for other female Marines, while success would prove definitively that excellence in the Marine Corps was determined by skill and dedication rather than gender. During the week before the test, Maria maintained her regular training routine, but also spent time reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about her father's advice about conducting herself with honor regardless of the outcome, and about the responsibility she felt to represent all female Marines with distinction. The night before the test, Maria received a phone call from her commanding general, who had been monitoring the investigation and its implications for the Marine Corps' ongoing efforts to integrate women into all military roles. "Staff Sergeant Santos," the general said, "I want you to know that regardless of tomorrow's outcome, your service to the Marine Corps has been exemplary. You've already proven yourself as a leader and warrior, and no test can change that record of achievement." The general's words provided reassurance, but Maria understood that the upcoming test would have consequences far beyond her individual career. The Marine Corps was watching to see whether their policies supporting women in combat roles would be validated or questioned based on her performance. As she prepared for sleep, Maria felt confident in her abilities, but understood the enormous pressure she faced. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test of not only her marksmanship skills, but also her character and resilience under the most challenging circumstances possible. The stage was set for a demonstration that would either conclusively prove Maria's exceptional abilities or provide ammunition for those who questioned whether women belonged in the most demanding roles within the Marine Corps. The outcome would influence military policy and cultural attitudes for years to come, making this far more than a simple shooting test. Morrison, meanwhile, spent the evening before the test calling contacts throughout the Marine Corps, trying to build support for his position and preparing for what he hoped would be vindication of his allegations. He remained convinced that Maria's previous performances had been fraudulent and that the controlled conditions of the upcoming test would expose her limitations. The battalion buzzed with anticipation as Marines discussed the upcoming test and its potential implications. Betting pools had formed among some Marines, while others focused on the broader questions about integration and equality that the test represented. Tomorrow would bring answers to questions that had divided the unit and attracted attention from the highest levels of Marine Corps leadership. The outcome would either end the controversy decisively or potentially escalate it to new levels of institutional conflict. The morning of the decisive test dawned clear and still, with perfect conditions for precision shooting. Colonel Hayes had assembled an impressive panel of observers, including expert marksmen from the Marine Corps shooting team, representatives from other military branches, and independent scoring officials who would ensure complete objectivity in evaluating Maria's performance. The test protocol was more comprehensive than any routine qualification, designed to evaluate every aspect of marksmanship under conditions that would eliminate any possibility of luck or external assistance. Maria would fire at distances ranging from 300 to 800 yards, using different rifles selected randomly from the armory, with ammunition batches chosen by lottery to ensure no possibility of specially prepared rounds. Word of the test had spread throughout the Marine Corps community, and observers began arriving early in the morning. Senior officers, marksmanship instructors, and Marines from other units came to witness what many considered a defining moment for women in the military. Morrison arrived at the range with several supporters who still believed his accusations despite the lack of evidence uncovered during the investigation. He appeared confident that the rigorous test conditions would finally expose what he considered Maria's fraudulent abilities, and he made no effort to hide his anticipation of her failure. Maria arrived precisely on time, carrying only her personal shooting gear and maintaining the same calm professionalism that had characterized her conduct throughout the investigation. She greeted the observers respectfully and began her preparation routine without any sign of nervousness or anxiety about the unprecedented scrutiny she faced. The first phase of testing involved shooting at 300 yards using a rifle selected randomly from a group of weapons that had been inspected and approved by the observing officials. Maria had no opportunity to practice with this specific rifle or adjust it to her preferences, requiring her to adapt quickly to unfamiliar equipment. She spent several minutes examining the rifle, checking its basic functions, and adjusting the sights to approximate zero based on her experience with similar weapons. The observers noted her methodical approach and obvious familiarity with Marine Corps equipment, but also her ability to work effectively with whatever tools were provided. The 300-yard target appeared clearly defined through the rifle's scope, and Maria settled into her shooting position with the same precision that had impressed observers during previous demonstrations. She took time to study the wind conditions and range environment, making mental calculations about how to compensate for factors that could affect bullet trajectory. Her first shot struck the target's center ring, earning a perfect score and demonstrating immediate adaptation to the unfamiliar rifle. She continued methodically through 10 shots, maintaining consistent accuracy that impressed even the expert marksmen serving as observers. "Her technique is flawless," commented Sergeant Major Thompson from the Marine Corps shooting team. "She's demonstrating textbook fundamentals with natural talent that can't be faked or taught quickly." The 300-yard stage concluded with Maria achieving 9 perfect scores out of 10 shots, missing perfection by only 1 point when a slight wind shift affected her 7th shot. This performance would have been exceptional under normal circumstances, but achieving it with an unfamiliar rifle under intense scrutiny was truly remarkable. Morrison's expression began to show concern as he realized that Maria's performance was not declining under pressure or with unfamiliar equipment. His certainty about her fraudulent abilities was being challenged by evidence he could not dispute or explain away. The second phase involved shooting at 500 yards, the distance where Morrison had been defeated in their previous competition. A different rifle was selected randomly, and Maria was given only basic time to familiarize herself with the weapon before beginning the shooting sequence. At 500 yards, environmental factors became more significant, and the targets appeared much smaller through the scope. Maria took additional time to study wind conditions and observe how other Marine shots were being affected by the atmospheric conditions at this distance. Her shooting position appeared rock solid as she settled in for the 500-yard stage. The observers could see through spotting scopes that she had achieved perfect sight alignment and was controlling her breathing with the rhythm of an experienced marksman. The first shot at 500 yards struck the target center for a perfect score, followed by a second perfect hit that demonstrated her ability to maintain consistency at challenging distances. Each subsequent shot showed the same precision and control, with Maria adapting to minor changes in wind conditions and maintaining perfect execution of marksmanship fundamentals. By the end of the 500-yard stage, Maria had achieved 8 perfect scores out of 10 shots, with 2 shots scoring 9 points due to slight wind shifts that would have challenged any marksman. Her total score at this distance exceeded what most Marines achieved during normal qualification, despite the pressure and unfamiliar equipment. The observing officials were clearly impressed by what they had witnessed so far, and even Marines who had initially been skeptical of Maria's abilities were forced to acknowledge the exceptional skill they were observing. "This is not luck or special equipment," noted Colonel Hayes to her fellow observers. "This Marine is demonstrating genuine expertise that reflects years of dedicated training and natural talent." The final and most challenging phase involved shooting at 800 yards, a distance that tested the limits of both equipment and human capability. At this range, factors like bullet drop, wind drift, and atmospheric conditions could dramatically affect shot placement, requiring exceptional skill and experience to achieve consistent accuracy. The rifle selected for this stage was equipped with a higher power scope suitable for long-range shooting, but Maria still had to adapt to the specific characteristics of the weapon and ammunition combination. She spent considerable time studying the ballistic charts and making calculations about how to compensate for the extended range. The 800-yard targets appeared tiny through even the high-power scope, and Maria took extra time to ensure perfect sight picture and body position before attempting her first shot. The observers noted her deliberate approach and obvious understanding of the complexities involved in extreme-range shooting. Her first shot at 800 yards required several seconds of flight time before impact, and the observers watched through spotting scopes to see the result. The bullet struck well within the scoring ring, earning 9 points and demonstrating Maria's ability to perform at distances that challenge even expert marksmen. She continued through the 800-yard stage with the same methodical precision, adapting to changing conditions and maintaining consistency despite the extreme difficulty of the task. Each shot required careful calculation and perfect execution, with no margin for error in technique or judgment. Morrison watched in growing dismay as Maria's performance at 800 yards exceeded what he could achieve himself under ideal conditions. His accusations of fraud and special advantages were being systematically disproven by her consistent excellence under the most rigorous test conditions possible. By the end of the 800-yard stage, Maria had achieved 6 perfect scores and, for 9-point hits, a performance that would be considered exceptional by any standard. The combination of distance, unfamiliar equipment, and intense observation had not degraded her shooting ability in any measurable way. The observing officials began calculating Maria's total scores across all phases of testing, while Marines throughout the range discussed what they had witnessed. The consensus among observers was that they had seen a demonstration of marksmanship skill that occurred rarely in any military service. Colonel Hayes called for attention as the official results were compiled and verified by multiple scoring officials. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as Marines waited to hear whether Maria's performance had been sufficient to silence her critics and prove her abilities conclusively. "Marines, I have witnessed many exceptional demonstrations of marksmanship during my career," Hayes announced. "But today's performance represents one of the finest displays of shooting skill I have ever observed." She paused to consult her scoring sheets before continuing. Staff Sergeant Santos achieved a combined score of 287 out of 300 possible points across 3 different distances using 3 different rifles selected randomly. This performance exceeds the scores achieved by most members of competitive shooting teams. The crowd of observers erupted in applause and cheers as Marines expressed their admiration for Maria's exceptional achievement. Even Marines who had been skeptical of her abilities joined in recognizing the undeniable skill they had witnessed. Morrison stood in stunned silence as the implications of Maria's performance became clear. His allegations had not only been disproven but had been refuted so thoroughly that his own credibility had been destroyed. The investigation had revealed his biases and unprofessional conduct, while Maria had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded his own by a significant margin. Colonel Hayes continued her announcement, addressing the broader implications of the test results. This investigation was initiated to examine allegations of irregularities and misconduct. Instead, we have documented a pattern of exceptional performance, dedication, and professionalism that represents the highest traditions of our Corps. She looked directly at Morrison as she spoke the next words. The allegations that prompted this investigation have been proven false and appear to have been motivated by personal bias rather than legitimate concerns about conduct or performance. The formal conclusion of the investigation represented a complete vindication for Maria, but she understood that the real test would be how the Marine Corps responded to the clear evidence that women could excel in traditionally male-dominated roles when given equal opportunities and evaluated by fair standards. Master Sergeant Williams approached Maria as the crowd began to disperse, extending his congratulations and expressing his admiration for how she had conducted herself throughout the ordeal. Staff Sergeant Santos, you have not only proven your individual abilities but have also demonstrated the character and professionalism that define the finest Marines, Williams said. Your conduct under pressure has been exemplary and sets a standard for all Marines to follow. Maria felt a sense of satisfaction and relief as the investigation concluded, but she also understood that her performance had implications beyond her individual career. She had proven that excellence in the Marine Corps was determined by skill, dedication, and character rather than gender, opening doors for other women who would follow in her footsteps. The test results would be documented in official reports that would influence Marine Corps policies and training programs for years to come. Maria's exceptional performance had provided clear evidence that women could meet and exceed the highest standards when given equal opportunities and fair evaluation. As the Marines departed the range, conversations focused on the implications of what they had witnessed and how it might change attitudes about women in military service. The demonstration had been so convincing that even the most skeptical observers were forced to acknowledge the reality of Maria's exceptional abilities. Morrison found himself isolated and facing disciplinary action for his unfounded accusations and unprofessional conduct. His career had been damaged by his inability to accept being outperformed by a female Marine, and he would serve as an example of how bias and prejudice could destroy both effectiveness and reputation. The stage was now set for the final chapter of this story, as the Marine Corps leadership would decide how to respond to the clear evidence that their policies supporting women in combat roles had been validated by exceptional individual performance under the most challenging circumstances. 6 months after the investigation concluded, the ripple effects of Maria's extraordinary demonstration continued to influence Marine Corps culture and policy. Her exceptional performance had become a case study taught in leadership courses, and her story was referenced in discussions about integration and equal opportunity throughout the military. Colonel Hayes had submitted a comprehensive report to Marine Corps headquarters detailing not only the investigation's findings, but also recommendations for policy changes based on the lessons learned. The report became required reading for senior officers and contributed to significant updates in how the Corps approached gender integration and performance evaluation. Maria found herself invited to speak at military academies and leadership conferences, sharing her experiences and encouraging young women considering military careers. These speaking engagements were initially uncomfortable for her, as she had never sought public attention or wanted to become a symbol for women's advancement in the military. I didn't set out to prove anything about women in the military, she would tell audiences. I just wanted to be the best Marine I could be. Excellence doesn't have a gender, and the Corps has always been about finding and developing the best in every person who earns the title. Her message resonated with audiences because it focused on the fundamental values of dedication, professionalism, and continuous improvement rather than on gender politics or social activism. She had proven her point through performance rather than rhetoric, making her story particularly powerful. The Marine Corps leadership took notice of Maria's exceptional abilities and character, leading to accelerated promotion opportunities and assignments to positions of greater responsibility. She was selected for advanced leadership courses typically reserved for the most promising senior non-commissioned officers. Her shooting abilities also earned recognition from the Marine Corps shooting team, and she was invited to compete in national and international marksmanship competitions representing the United States military. These competitions would provide opportunities to demonstrate that her exceptional performance was not limited to training environments, but could be sustained at the highest levels of competition. Meanwhile, Morrison faced the consequences of his unprofessional conduct and false accusations. He received formal reprimands, was removed from leadership positions, and eventually transferred to a different unit where his bias would not affect unit morale or effectiveness. His career had been permanently damaged by his inability to accept being outperformed by a female Marine. The investigation report noted that Morrison's case illustrated the importance of addressing bias and prejudice before they could damage unit effectiveness and individual careers. His example became a cautionary tale about how personal prejudices could undermine military readiness and destroy professional relationships. Maria's success story began attracting attention from outside the military as well. Journalists and documentary filmmakers approached her for interviews, wanting to tell the story of how one woman's exceptional performance had challenged stereotypes and influenced military policy. She was initially reluctant to participate in media coverage, preferring to focus on her military duties rather than public relations activities. However, her commanding officers encouraged her to share her story as a way to inspire young people and demonstrate the opportunities available in military service. The first major article about Maria appeared in a prominent military magazine, detailing her background, the investigation, and her exceptional shooting performance. The article was carefully written to focus on her professional achievements rather than creating controversy about gender issues in the military. The response to the article was overwhelmingly positive, with letters from Marines throughout the Corps expressing support for Maria and pride in her achievements. Many female Marines wrote to thank her for proving that women could excel in traditionally male-dominated roles when given equal opportunities. However, the article also generated some negative reactions from individuals who remained opposed to women in combat roles. Maria received a few hostile messages questioning her motives and abilities, but these were vastly outnumbered by expressions of support and admiration. A year after the investigation, Maria was promoted to gunnery sergeant ahead of her peers, recognizing both her exceptional performance and her leadership potential. The promotion ceremony was attended by senior officers who had followed her story and wanted to demonstrate the Marine Corps' commitment to promoting excellence regardless of gender. During the promotion ceremony, Brigadier General Martinez, who had overseen the investigation's aftermath, spoke about Maria's impact on the Marine Corps. Gunnery Sergeant Santos has demonstrated that excellence knows no boundaries and that the Marine Corps benefits when we evaluate performance based on ability and character rather than preconceived notions. The general continued, "Her story reminds us that our Corps is stronger when we embrace the talents of all Marines and provide equal opportunities for everyone who earns our title." Maria's new responsibilities included training and mentoring junior Marines, many of whom were women inspired by her example to pursue challenging military careers. She found particular satisfaction in helping young Marines develop their own potential and overcome obstacles they faced in their military service. Her shooting abilities continued to attract attention, and she was selected to compete in the prestigious President's 100 competition, an annual event that brings together the finest military marksmen from all services. Her participation would provide another opportunity to demonstrate that her exceptional performance was not limited to Marine Corps environments. The President's 100 competition featured challenging conditions and the most skilled marksmen from across the military, providing the ultimate test of shooting ability under pressure. Maria approached the competition with the same methodical preparation and calm professionalism that had characterized her previous performances. She finished second overall in the competition, outperforming marksmen from all military services and earning recognition as one of the finest military shooters in the United States. Her performance validated the exceptional abilities that had first been demonstrated during that controversial qualification at Camp Pendleton. The competition results were reported in military publications and helped cement Maria's reputation as an exceptional marksman whose abilities transcended service boundaries. Her success also reflected positively on the Marine Corps' marksmanship training programs and commitment to developing excellence in all Marines. 2 years after the original controversy, Maria was selected for promotion to Staff Sergeant and assigned to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, as a marksmanship instructor. This assignment would allow her to influence the training of thousands of new Marines and ensure that future generations would be taught by someone who embodied the Corps' highest standards of excellence. Her assignment to recruit training was particularly significant because it would allow her to serve as a role model for female recruits who were just beginning their military careers. Many of these young women had heard Maria's story and were inspired by her example of perseverance and excellence. In her role as an instructor, Maria emphasized the fundamental principles of marksmanship while also teaching lessons about character, professionalism, and overcoming adversity. Her students learned not only how to shoot accurately but also how to conduct themselves with honor and dignity under pressure. The range where Maria had first faced discrimination and skepticism was eventually renamed in honor of her achievements, with a plaque commemorating her exceptional performance and its impact on Marine Corps culture. The ceremony dedicating the range was attended by Marines from throughout her career, including many who had initially doubted her abilities. Master Sergeant Williams, who had retired but returned for the ceremony, spoke about the transformation he had witnessed in Marine Corps culture since Maria's extraordinary demonstration. "This range represents more than exceptional marksmanship," he said. "It represents the Marine Corps' commitment to recognizing and developing excellence wherever we find it." Maria's story continued to inspire new generations of Marines, both male and female, who understood that their Corps valued performance, character, and dedication above all other considerations. Her legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements to influence how the Marine Corps approached training, evaluation, and promotion policies. 5 years after the original controversy, Maria had been promoted to Master Sergeant and was serving as the senior marksmanship instructor for the entire recruit training region. Her influence on Marine Corps training was substantial, and thousands of Marines had learned fundamental skills and values under her guidance. Looking back on the journey that began with skepticism and discrimination on a shooting range, Maria reflected on how the Marine Corps had evolved and how her own experiences had contributed to positive changes in military culture. She had never intended to become a symbol or spokesperson, but she had embraced the responsibility that came with her exceptional abilities and achievements. The impossible shot that had silenced her critics had been just the beginning of a career that demonstrated the Marine Corps' capacity for growth, fairness, and recognition of excellence. Her story served as proof that barriers could be overcome through dedication, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to the values that define the finest military organizations. In her current role, Maria continued to train new Marines in marksmanship, while also teaching them about the importance of treating all Marines with respect and evaluating performance based on ability rather than stereotypes. Her influence extended far beyond technical training to shape the character and attitudes of future Marine leaders. The Marine Corps had been changed by Maria's exceptional performance and the courage she had shown in facing discrimination and skepticism. Her story became part of the Corps' institutional memory, reminding all Marines that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources and that their organization was strongest when it embraced the talents of all who earned the title. As Maria looked toward the future, she saw continued opportunities to serve her Corps and country while mentoring new generations of Marines who would carry forward the values of excellence, integrity, and mutual respect that had guided her own remarkable career. Her legacy would live on in every Marine she trained and every barrier she had helped break down through her exceptional service and unwavering dedication to the Marine Corps' highest ideals.